Holy Spirit, beloved of our soul, we adore you. Enlighten us, guide us, strengthen us, and console us. Tell us what we should do. We promise to submit ourselves to all that you desire of us and to accept all that you permit to happen to us. Only let us know your will. Amen. All right, let's look at the syllabus a little bit, see where we are. We've covered a good bit of material. And all here focusing on how we are going to be faithful citizens and what it means to be a faithful citizen. And then those of you who are in schoolwork, trying to understand the Catholic educational system as forming faithful citizens. What does that mean? That these students who you are going to be teaching become full of faith and remain good citizens of the United States. What are you going to do in the school? Not only in the curricular demands of the school, by way of reading, writing, and doing numbers, but also how is the school creating a culture within the school that is going to reflect something more than you would get in public education. And I think that is the major question, because people have put the Catholic school up there, and what is it? What is it that faith contributes to the way of life in the school? Remember, if you're trying to create a culture in the school, there are three things that are important. Go over these all the time. How we perceive God, how we perceive ourselves and human beings, how we perceive the world, and particularly how the three are related. Pope Francis uses a wonderful term. He talks about integral ecology. Ecology is the study of the house. Oikos in Greek means house. Ology means a study of. So we want to study how best to keep the house in order. And that is going to require an internal order of the soul and an external order in how we relate to one another in the school, which should be a microcosm of what we want society to be. So what do you do? How do you do? The economy, by the way, economia means good housekeeping. It was only in the 15th century that it became more specifically related to the financial dimension of life. And then today, you know, we're talking about macro economy, microeconomy, and we're faced with how do we have good housekeeping economically for the world, financially at least. So you ask yourself those questions. In this school, how are we going to create a culture which is going to be deeply rooted in our Christian sense of God, fully revealed in Jesus Christ as the God of love, and human person as God's greatest creation. In the image of God, created in the image of God. And what that means is the way we reflect God the most is how we relate to one another in love, as the Father relates to the Son and the Holy Spirit in the Trinity. There is a book out called The Divine Dance. and it's about the Trinity. And the early fathers of the church, particularly Athanasius, talked about the perichoresis in the Trinity. It's the dance going on in the Trinity among the three persons. And the dance consists in the dance of love. So if we are creating a culture, we want to practice good housekeeping, we are seeking order. For us in the school, the order begins with and ends with how we love in the school, how we relate lovingly to each other. How we relate lovingly to each other. And that's the one thing that is going to differentiate the school from public education, because that's not the task of public education. And it's from that worldview of a culture rooted in love and destined for love. It's in that culture, then, that we find our fulfillment. That's what it makes it strictly Catholic and Christian. So this is a big job. So what we've been trying to do here is look how our secular culture has been formed. How does American culture, the dominant American culture, look at God, look at the person, and look at the world? And we know that depending on that Trinity, if you like to call it that, Trinity of God, the human person, and the world, the human person, and God, flow, therefore, a sense of mission. How we are supposed to live. How we're supposed to live. This, contained in this, is an understanding of what we value, okay? All coming from this vision, down through a sense of our destiny and our mission, and then what we value and how those values affect norms. Of behavior. And ultimately, we try to create for ourselves symbols. Which, when we look at them and we use them, understand that contained in here, this reflects all of this. These symbols reflect all of this. So what we're trying to do in the class is contrast or take and come to a deeper understanding of all of this from an American point of view, a public point of view, which is going to be contained in essence in our Declaration of Independence and in our Constitution. And then you have the task as leaders in Catholic education. What do we bring to it to make it fuller? What do we find there that we can build on? And what do we find in there that we have to say, no, that's not enough. There's something more. So this is what we've been doing. And the way we've been doing this is going back, first of all, to talk about what culture is. Say a little bit about God, man, and the world from a Catholic point of view. And then we said, if we look at American culture, we have to understand its roots. What are the roots of this tree that we have? What are the roots? And we went way back, okay? Went back, way back as far as Moses and Jerusalem, where we find the roots of moral law for us. We looked at that. We looked at its weaknesses and its strengths. We moved up to a contemporaneous other culture going on in Greece while this is going on in the Middle East, in Palestine. Over here, we have the Greek thinkers arising, Greek culture in the city-states, Athens and Sparta, and so forth. We look at the Magna Graecia, the way they went, the Greeks went all the way to Sicily, trying to do that. We looked at the weaknesses in their perception of freedom, particularly, because they looked upon freedom as relegated merely to the citizens of their cities, of their city-state. We looked also at the great person, Solon, right? And what he brought to an understanding of a mixed government and participation in the government. We looked how that fell apart. We looked at the great philosophical minds, okay, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. And we looked, therefore, after that, to look at, order of the mind, philosophical order of the mind. We went to Rome. We started looking particularly at the Republican period. Republican because it had division of power and there was some form of representation. Certainly not like we understand it. And after looking at all that, we focused on Cicero particularly, Marcus Aurelius, these character types who embodied what it meant to be the Republic. So we get there the order of law. Order of law. Having looked at that, we looked how Gregory the Great sent Augustine of Canterbury to England, how it was Christianized there, how the Romans continued to rule there, and how this all came from both Anglo-Saxon and Norman roots in looking at the common law as it rose up on the basis of the people's experience and also on its the basis of precedent that was set, differing from Roman law, which is to define a law up here and then apply it. Rather, over here, people looked at their customs, how they dealt with each other, how they began to determine what was right and what was just, and two systems of court, which allowed for the application of the law, but also of equity, kindness, equity, another court, the exchequer, where if you felt your sentence was too rigid, you would go there and you could appeal. We looked at 1215 with the Magna Carta, the first time the king had ever been reigned in by barons. They were all barons. Even the king was a baron, but he was the top baron. And he was looked at particularly to unite all the barons in time of war against anybody who's going to come and attack them. We watched that whole development of English history, the development of common law up through Henry VIII, through Elizabeth, and so forth, and then we looked at the Reformation and what the Reformation was beginning to do. The Reformation came because it was attempting to reform the church. Then it ended up breaking off from the one communion with the Pope for reasons of power, economic and otherwise. And as we went on, we saw how this focus in the Reformation on something that's very good in Christianity, and that is my individual relationship with God. My individual relationship with God was focusing more and more on individual authority, individual truth-seeking, and individualism just in the way you related to other people. So much so that as it broke down from Lutheranism into Calvinism, through Presbyterianism, into the synodal kind of church where people meet and you have elders who are elected to those positions, it was becoming very democratic. And that's why in Scotland, you had developed, we're going to say more about that today, was the National Covenant. The National Covenant among the people in the church and in the state. And at times, and in theory, they were supposed to be separated, but for a long time, they were one in themselves. Well, all of these things affected the founding of the United States, particularly the immigration over to the colonies, which the king left alone. He didn't care much about it. There's woods over there, they're hunting over there, they're making their way over there. We give them a charter, okay? In the charter is contained all the rights of Englishmen. All the rights of Englishmen. And what those rights are coming from is all the way back to the Magna Carta, 1215. All the way up, all the way up. And the immigration starts in 1605, 1620, etc., while in England you have a tremendous religious upheaval, tremendous. You can't imagine the upheaval after Henry VIII, who remained Catholic probably until his death, and then Elizabeth I, who had to find some way of governing this place where you had all this stuff breaking through with a whole variety of different perceptions of what it meant to be a Christian and follow Christ. So she develops the Book of Common Prayer, and she develops the 39 Articles, and those, everybody had to get, that was the consensus for them. They were trying to get the consensus to rule. 1600s, already colonies are starting over there, and as early as 1615, believe it or not, there were some slaves being brought in here, early as 1615. And an economy was beginning to develop here based on their slave labor. So we have that going on, and then we have 1688, which was the Velvet Revolution. Do you have a class in here?
I do.
You do?
I do.
Oh, wow. Well, we're gonna get out, that's all we do. Gotta get out.
If there's another room.
Is 013, is somebody in 013? Right next door, right here.
Across the hall,
Yes.
I'll check.
Thank you. Okay. In the midst of my beautiful